Good morning and welcome to this video from Yoker Evangelical Church. It's Monday the 1st of June and this morning in our Bible readings we read Deuteronomy chapter 5 and Psalm 88. And in this video I'd like to take a look at something from Deuteronomy 5 that encouraged me this morning as I was reading it in my quiet time. So Deuteronomy, as Greg said the other day when we looked at chapter 1, is Moses' sermon to a new generation of the Israelites. The people that are about to enter the promised land, Moses gives them this final talk to prepare them for entering the place that God has promised them. And as a really important part of that, in chapter 5, we see where he tells this new generation about when the first generation heard the 10 Commandments. And he just reminds them of these commandments. And I think the people are meant to learn an important lesson about how to respond to these commandments. As Moses tells the story looking back at this event from his own life, it's amazing to hear again the response of the people. And Moses confirms that their response back then was good. So just listen how he describes them in verses 28 and 29. The Lord heard you when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, I have heard what this people said to you. Everything they said was good. So their response was right. And then this is what God says. Oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commands always, so that it might go well with them and their children forever. Now, in the story, God has appeared to the Israelites as a burning fire on top of a mountain and as a cloud, as a deep darkness. And they are terrified. And so they ask Moses if he can speak on God's behalf to them, because they are just dumbstruck by God himself speaking to all of them. And God says, yes, this is a right response. What he says in verse 29 confirms that their response is right. It is right that they fear God. Now, that is a phrase that we are sometimes a bit uncomfortable about. We like the idea of loving God, and we're less comfortable when God says that we are to fear him. But actually, in the context of this chapter, it makes perfect sense. It's a right response to an all-powerful God that we as mortals, as weak human beings, would be scared of him. It's the same response as when the people see the mountaintop burst into flames, and when they hear the voice of God, they are scared. We are scared by things that are more powerful than us. That is right. And just as if you were in a room with a lion, your fear would dominate the way that you acted in that situation. So when the Israelites are living with a holy God, their response is dominated by who he is. And so it is right that they would fear God. And out of that, it is right that they would keep his commands. And that they would have hearts that love to obey God, not obeying him out of a sense of duty or obligation, but that out of this fear and love, that they would be delighted to do what he says. And out of this response, God says, would come a blessing. And that is what Deuteronomy is encouraging this generation to do. Now, unfortunately, as we read on through the rest of the Old Testament, we see that the people really struggle with this. And we do too. Because of our sinful hearts, we struggle to obey God, and we really struggle to obey his laws. We don't have a right attitude towards him, and so this blessing that was promised, it gets denied from the people. Eventually they get kicked out of the promised land. But the good news of the New Testament and of Jesus is that there is one who has come who does this perfectly. When Jesus arrives, he has a perfect attitude and relationship towards God. And he is the one who perfectly keeps all of God's laws, thus deserving this blessing. And when he dies on the cross in our place, he shares that blessing to his people. to people that have been bought by his blood, the privilege of this blessing is theirs, not because they have obeyed, but because Jesus has obeyed on their behalf. So this passage from Deuteronomy shines a light on Jesus' work. It shows us how significant it was that Jesus was a perfect human being. Greg is on holiday this week, so for this week, for the daily videos, we are going to have different members from the church sharing something that's encouraged them from the readings that day. So we look forward to seeing different faces here in our daily videos. I hope you have a good day, and God bless.